Hey guys, welcome back to 358 Outdoors. Today we're going to be talking about the 7mm-08, specifically out of my son's rifle. And we're going to be shooting the 165 Sierra Tip Game King. And I'm curious if the 7mm-08 case is big enough or has the capacity enough to push the 165 fast enough to make it a practical big game hunting bullet at practical hunting distances, say to 400 yards. So let's get to it. Hey guys, before we get started, I just want to take a moment and again thank you for being here. If you like what we're putting out, please hit that like button and that subscribe button. That would be greatly appreciated. I would be really grateful. But anyways, now that we're talking about the 708 today, Michigan DNR, Department of Natural Resources, put out the drawing results for the 2025 elk and bear hunts. For my son and daughter, we put in points for the bear and a chance for an elk. Myself, I put in a chance for a bear in the unit where I live and also put in a chance for an elk. But unfortunately, none of us were drawn. But in the event that my son would have been drawn, he shoots a 7mm-08. And when one thinks of the 7mm-08, you're thinking of bullet weight class. The sweet spot tends to run about 120 to 150. You see a pretty good offering, at least factory-wise, in that weight range. You don't see very many offerings over 150. You don't see very many 160, 165s, 175s. But since I had the 165 Tip Game Kings on the shelf, I really wanted to see if that 7mm-08 case had enough capacity to push the 165, that class bullet, fast enough to make it a viable option for him in the future, or if he got drawn. Out for elk, out to practical distances, hunting distances, say 400 yards. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I can confidently say after seeing what I saw out of his rifle, unequivocally yes. I believe the 708 would be just fine. But the numbers will bear that out, so let's take a look at those. So my son's rifle is a Remington 700 BDL with a 22-inch barrel. We used once fired Hornady cases trimmed to the recommended trim length. Wind River Energy large rifle primers were used. The Sierra 165 Tip Game King loaded to an overall length of 2.80. What this does not mention is we use the RL19 powder. We use that powder because the Sierra manual recommended it as their hunting load with a top load of 48.8 grains. We didn't start that high, and I'll tell you just here in a minute why we didn't start that high. But when I look to get max performance out of a case, I just do not rely on one manual. I reference many manuals just to get an overall picture of where the safe zone is, and we have to understand and realize that all rifles are like people in that we have different personalities, and the rifle is going to have a different personality. Some loads you may not get to the published max load in your rifle before running into pressure issues. So I went and I researched the Sierra, Berger, Nosler, Spear, Swift, and Woodley manuals. You can see here the variation between all of them. And one thing I noticed right away is RL19 being an extruded powder, stick powder, a very bulky powder. It eats up a lot of case. It eats it up quickly. So every single load, even the start loads, were compressed loads. And you can see the Sierra manual has a 48.8 as a max, which is higher than any other manual listed here. And it had a published velocity of about 2,700 feet per second out of a 24-inch barrel. And we'll find out here shortly that that's not exactly what we got. So when you look at all the manuals, the average low velocity, starting velocity was 24, and the average high velocity was 2780. I started at 45.0 grains and went up to 48.8. And my low average was 2366 for 45.0. And my top offload at 48.8 gave me an average of 25.29, which is considerably less than the 2700 Sierra. The Sierra manual said we were going to get. I anticipated landing at about the 2650 mark. because the barrel that we have is 2 inches shorter than their test barrel. So conservatively speaking, I was planning on losing 50 feet a second, but obviously we lost quite a bit more than that. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. 25-29 is what we got. The question is that enough to make that Sierra bullet out of that 708 case a viable and practical option for elk out to 400 yards? And let's look at that. All right, launching at 2,529 feet per second. We're going to be 2 inches high, a little more than 2 inches high at 100. That's going to put us 0 at 200, 9 inches low at 300, and 26 inches low at 400. 300 yards. The bullet's arriving there with 2,129 feet per second, delivering 1,661 pounds of energy on target. 400 yards, still traveling 2,004 feet per second, arriving on target with 1,472 foot-pounds of energy. The experts say that you should bank on or need 1,500 pounds minimum for elk, or big game such as elk. I don't entirely believe in that. I believe, you put the right bullet where it needs to go, the bullet's properly constructed for what you're hunting, you're going to collect your trophy. A lot of people hang their hat on energy figures, and I used to be one of them, but I don't any longer, just because I think shot placement and bullet construction is far more important than energy. There was a gentleman by the name of John Pondero. He comes out with the knockout formula, where that formula favors bullet mass and the energy formula favors bullet velocity. Well, recently Hornady has come out with the HITS formula, which stands for the Hornady Index of Terminal Standards, and it takes all of those factors into consideration, and its formula spits out a number and based on its formula, this particular load, at 100 yards we have a figure of 1,153, and at 400 yards we have a HITS formula or HITS number of 966. And based on Hornady's own rating, you can see it right here, for hunting large heavy game not considered dangerous, including elk, moose, American plain or African plains game, bison, and other animals weighing between 300 and 2,000 pounds, you need to fall between that 901 and 1,500. And as you can see, at 100 yards and even at 400 yards, the 708 with the 165 tip Game King at 2,529 feet per second will get the job done, according to Hornady. So anyways, for what it's worth, I thought that was pretty interesting. So now let's take a look at the gel test and see how it performed in the gel. Okay, so this particular gel test was conducted at 100 yards. The impact velocity at 100 yards was 2,391 feet per second. Rough energy at 100 yards, 2,095 foot-pounds. We had 22.5 inches of penetration. Weight retention was 135 grains, or 82% weight retention. The bullet expanded to a .655 diameter, which is 2.3 times its original width. So all in all, not too bad. All right, so to recap, 7mm-08, 165 grams Sierra tipped Game King. 708's plenty enough case capacity to push that bullet fast enough to be effective out to 400 yards. That was the main point of this project, was to see if the 708 case would push a heavier class bullet. Not specifically the 165 Game King. I only used those because that's what I had on the shelf. Of that weight, it's the actually heaviest 7mm I have, so that's why I used it. And I was pleasantly surprised. Even with the lower starting velocity, the higher BC of that Game King really paid dividends as it got downrange. Completely viable option out to 400 yards. However, that does come with a caveat, though. When I pulled the slug out of the gel block, there's nothing holding the lead in the case, and the lead just fell out, which for me is a bit concerning, especially a Michigan bull elk tag is a one draw in your life. You get drawn once, that's it, you're done, whether you get your bull or not. So to rely on that, hoping that doesn't come apart, which, you know, on a broadside it probably wouldn't, but on a quartering angle, man, I don't know. I would probably want to shoot something a bit more stout, maybe like a 160 partition. Doesn't have the BC that does. You could drive it just a little bit faster. Maybe pull your max range back to maybe 350. But man, you know, that 708 is pretty versatile. If you shoot one, don't feel like you're bound to, you know, the 139 SST, the 140s, even the 150. Great bullet, but I mean, you can go heavier than that, especially if, you know, your shots are going to be closer, but they will work out to 300-400 yards, as we could see here. So even based on Hornady's new hits formula, I kind of find all that stuff silly. I firmly believe that you put the right bullet, the right constructed bullet, where it needs to go in that animal, and you're going to collect your trophy. So based on that, we're going to go now look at Africa. We're sitting here midsummer. August is right around the, I'm sorry, September's right around the corner. And I had to change pace here, going from one bullet to another because of some tests that we did, and we're going to show you that here in a little bit. So appreciate you being here, and look forward to seeing you real soon. God bless.